Welcome to Garden Delights. I'm Susan Howington, Family Consumer Science Agent with the Henry County Cooperative Extension, partnership with the University of Georgia. Today we have a great show for you. We're going to talk about apples, and I hope it's one of your fruits that you really like because we like it in our family. But we also are going to do a great recipe that's very, very simple called diced apple salad. We'll do a little bit about the nutrition like we always do. We'll hear from Frank Hancock, our Agriculture and Natural Resource Agent. He'll talk about apples, and hopefully if you don't have an apple tree, this will make you want to go buy one. So we'll see you back in just a little bit. We're going to talk more about apples, and we're going to talk about diced apple salad as far as our salad that we're going to make today for our recipe. But let's talk about this wonderful fruit. Hopefully this is something that you put in your basket or in your refrigerator at home, and this season, September all the way to about June, but especially September, October, is that peak time. Those apples start coming in. So start looking around in your grocery store, or if you know someone that has a backyard tree, see if you can ask them if you can borrow some of their apples, because it's nothing best than having a fresh apple off of someone's tree. Apples are probably one of the best things you can eat to get a lot of fiber in your diet. Not only are you going to get fiber, but we're all looking for ways to cut on calories. So one medium apple about this size is 80 calories. It's also going to be cholesterol-free, saturated fat-free, so all this is good because this apple is giving you great nutrients with less calories. It also has a little bit of iron, calcium, and it has a little bit of vitamin C, and not a whole lot, but it does have some vitamin C. So this one apple is giving you a lot of good nutrients. So let's talk about selecting an apple. Now when you're at the store, I want you to think about how many times someone has touched that apple. So we do know once we take those apples home, whether you pick it off your tree in your backyard or if you pick it at the store at the grocery store, you want to make sure that you take it home and wash it. You want to look for a firm apple. Now my husband, he is an apple eater. He eats one every day for lunch, and he will go and he's going to grab it. He's going to make sure it's firm, and that's what you need to also do, is to make sure the apple is firm. You want to make sure you don't see any bruises, any dents in it. Make sure you see a stem in it. And that tells you that you're selecting a really good apple. Now, once you get the apples and you bring them to your house, put it in your refrigerator, it does keep the apple fresher. These today that I've chose to use are the ones that you can use to put into a recipe, but there's going to be some that people want to buy. There's going to be like the Granny Smith that you want to use for a tartar apple that you can put in your recipes or either in a pie, or when I'm going to talk more about your canning and selecting part of it, that's something that people may want to think about. But your apples are important. When you're picking them, pick up what you think. You've got a lot of varieties at the grocery store. People grow a lot of different varieties for different reasons. Talking to Frank, my co-worker, we were talking about, wouldn't it be great to have some homemade apple cider? You can't beat that when it gets colder. So that's just to think about, your nutrients, your selection. We store it in the refrigerator to keep it longer than about 3 weeks. But let's talk about preparing it. Like I said, you've got to wash it, and preparing it depends on how you're going to cook it. And today in the recipe, I'll tell you more about how I'm going to do this, which will be just to dice this apple up. But you may want to do different things. You may want to bake the whole apple. So it really depends on how you want to prepare it. So apples are a great fruit to have in your home. If you have kids, it is great because they can pick it up and go and eat it. If you have little ones, a lot of times they like for you to slice them up, dice them up, and they'll eat them. So you have to adapt to whoever you're trying to feed it to, because you really want to make sure they're eating fruits. And the only way you can do that is to make sure that you're putting it out there for somebody to grab and eat. So we've talked a little bit about apples. What we're going to do now is we're going to go and see Frank Hancock out in the garden again talking about apples and an apple tree. And when we come back, we'll be making diced apple salad.
Today we're going to talk about apples. Apples are a little more complex than anything we've talked about so far. There's a lot of things you need to know if you're going to grow apples, especially in this part of Georgia. They They don't grow true to form. If you try to plant apple seeds like Johnny Appleseed did, the apples you get will not be the same as the ones on the tree. There is some possibility you might get some that are good, but the bigger probability is you will not get some that are good, and so planting from seed is not generally done at all. They are propagated, that they get the varieties that they want to get the good apples from. They'll take the scion wood, which is the apple bearing part of the tree. They will match that up with a root stock that is suitable to grow the tree. So in selecting apples to grow in this part of Georgia, you need to pay attention to root stocks. You need to pay attention to the scion wood that's being used. The University of Georgia has got a very good brochure that you need to become familiar with. You can come by the office and get one of them. And it goes through all of the things you need to do to grow apples, including it shows you the apple zones in Georgia, which we are in apple zone number 3. And it also suggests some varieties that grow well in which region of the state. So if you select an apple that grows really good in North Georgia and it's not good for this region, you're not going to have good luck. Same thing, some of these apples grow way down in South Georgia and they are also not going to grow well here. One of the main things that we need to look at as we select apple varieties is disease resistant. We have lots of problems with fire blight. This tree I'm standing beside has had some fire blight on it this year, and you're going to have fire blight. So when you're selecting trees for this area, fire blight resistant is important. Apple scab is another one that's important. Cedar apple rust resistance. We have a lot of cedar apple rust. You know, if you read about cedar apple rust, you'll see that people want to grow. They don't want to have any cedar trees within a mile of their apple orchard. Well, good luck on that in this area. We got cedar trees every 25 feet, so that's not a possibility. So you got to select a variety that's going to let you do that. Another thing about apples is you're going to have to prune the fruit. Not only do you prune the tree, most of them are pruned to a central leader system, but you also have got to thin the apples. They'll be overloaded. This particular tree we're looking at right here was overloaded a month ago. It was not pruned, and so what happens to a fruit tree, whether it's an apple or a peach or whatever it is, it's going to prune itself. And the problem with it pruning itself is it's not selective. What we'd like to see is an apple about every 6 inches on the branch. They will get bigger, they will be better. And if they're growing too close together, then they're gonna fall off. There's apples on the ground here under this tree. That pruning can take place when the apple's about the size of my thumb. You just go through and just take off the ones. But you can see this branch right here, which was loaded with apples on these spurs. This is a spur-bearing apple tree, which is best for the home gardener. These spurs have dropped their apples, and they just dropped them all. They didn't keep any of them because the tree was overloaded. And apples grow in clusters. You can get clusters where the apples are touching each other, and that will cause them to rot. And they'll grow big against each other, and they will just shed themselves off the tree. So disease resistant, number one in selecting a cultivar. Thin the fruit so that you control which ones stay and which ones go, and you can pick the best looking fruit when you prune it, where the tree itself doesn't select them in that fashion. It just drops them on the ground to lighten the load. So as you select your cultivars, and this brochure we're talking about has a good section here for selecting cultivars. As I look through it, I would see that Liberty is good for growing in this area, that it's got good fruit on it, and it's resistant. As you look at the resistant chart, it's the most resistant to fire blight, and apple rust, powdery mildew, and apple scab. So those are big considerations in selecting, and as you look at the chart, you can see that Enterprise might be a good one to grow with it. That is also a decent apple, and it's got disease resistant. Then you switch over to your rootstocks. As I study the rootstocks, looks like to me that a Geneva rootstock number 202 is resistant to a lot of the diseases that we have in this area. So that would be my combination. Try to find me a Liberty on a Geneva 202 rootstock, and then that starts me off with a chance of avoiding some of these diseases. That just gives you just a little bit about apple trees, and yeah, I know Johnny Appleseed, he sowed seed all over where the settlers were settling down. He had a little different goal in mind. One, he didn't have a truck to haul his apple trees out there with, and so he planted seed, but they were mostly making apple cider out of those apples, and they weren't trying to grow good tasting cultivars like we try to grow in our backyard. Also, as you select rootstocks control the size of the tree. So you want that Geneva 202 I was talking about is a medium sized tree. If you plant apples on seedling rootstock, they're going to grow big. You can't pick them, you can't spray them. Unless you're good at standing on a step ladder, you're not going to be able to do much with that big tree like Grandma used to grow that's sitting out in the field now. That we can get some apples off of it, but we never can get them all because some of them are too high up in the air. So you can select that for the backyard garden and have pretty good luck. But there's some things that you need to understand, as we talked about. Get one of these brochures, study it. Now I promise you, if you go to one of these stores that's selling apple trees around here and tell them you want a Liberty apple tree on Geneva 202 rootstock, they will probably not know what you're talking about. So you need to get your terminology right, and you might need to deal with people that supply apple trees to apple orchards and that kind of thing, so you get that expertise, because it may not exist everywhere that apple trees exist. So we've got apple spray guides, we've got apple literature about how to grow them, but you got to be willing to study a little bit and select some that don't have fire blight and don't have apple rust and all those things. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the problems with not pruning the tree, not thinning out the apples, and a little bit of fire blight. This particular tree right here has got some fire blight. I'm gonna cut it back. What you would do with fire blight a little earlier than this, when you first see it, is cut it about 6 inches below the dead spot. Then you can use some tetramycin or some bactericide like that to try to help control it. But nothing beats selecting varieties that are resistant to it. So I'm gonna cut this branch off right here that's got the fire blight on it. And you can see the fire blight. One of the telltale signs of fire blight is it has a shepherd's crook on the end of it when it's first developing, and it is a serious problem with not just apple trees but with fruit trees in general. On our pruning or our thinning side of it, you see how these apples are growing in clusters right here, and they're touching each other. In fact, this particular one I think has got an extra branch growing through it. Well, when these apples were smaller, we could come in here and take off all but the best one. The ones under the bottom right here don't get much sunlight anyway. And so we could come in here, and then this apple would grow 3 times as big and be nice and healthy, where right now they've all got little spots on them where they've been touching together. You see that rotten spot right there? That's what happens when you let the clusters grow together. And so then folks will bring that apple in my office and say, what can I put on my tree to stop that from happening? And the answer is not a thing. So just keep that in mind. That's pretty close to what I know about apples. There's a whole lot more to the apple story, but you come by the office, we'll sit down and talk about it. Now let's go inside and see what Susan is fixing with apples today. I'm sure it's gonna be good.
Today we're going to make a diced apple salad. I hope you'll like the recipe. We're going to go right into the recipe, and it's a very, very simple recipe. But like I said, apples are in season, so think about ways to use those apples. For the recipe, it calls for 2.5 cups of diced apples. This is 2 cups here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and dice up this apple here. This is a medium-sized apple, and to make this recipe, you need about 3 medium to 2.5 medium apples to make this 2.5 cups. Now you can put more apples if you like apples. You may want to put more apples, but the recipe it calls for 2.5 cups. So that's what we're going to lean toward. So I'm just going to need a part of this apple to get my 1/2 cup, and that means that if I get to later, I get to eat some of this apple. What I'm going to do real quick, I told you about a teaspoon of lemon juice, and I have just a little bit of lemon juice in this container here. And I just want to show you what I would like to do is I'm just going to take the corner of this paper towel and I'm going to dip it in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rub it around on this apple, and it's just going to keep it from turning just a little bit while I'm cutting it. And I'm going to do the other side, because if I put this apple in the refrigerator, this other half, it's going to look nice and eatable when I get through it. It won't have the dark colors. Now, it's not saying anything that's wrong with the apple. That's just what happens to an apple once it hits the air. It's just going to turn. So what we're going to do is just going to cut the apple. And what I like to do is just cut some wedges like this. I'm going to make them kind of a bite size. And if you like them bigger, that's fine. But I always try to think about people when they're eating. You know, what size is going to be best for them to put it in their mouth. So that's what I'm going to do. So I've cut little wedges, and then I'm going to cut the wedge in half. And it's up to you how you want to do this. And then I'm going to cut the other one, and I'm just going to dice these just till I get a little bite size. And you can see what size I have in the bowl already. And you can see that I just took a little bit off of that apple, and I'm almost have that 1/2 cup that I need. So I'm going to take a little bit more. And I'm going to cut those in half and put those in there. And like I said, when you're dicing an apple, you don't realize how fast it'll fill up a cup. You'll have 2 cups before you know it, and then you'll have that 1/2 cup. So I'm going to do just a little bit more, and you can see that I only took just a little bit off of that apple. I'm going to get the core part off of it. I don't want the seeds in my salad. So I'm going to take just a little bit more. That's 3 more wedges that I'm going to work with. And I'm going to kind of cut those. Well, these are kind of small, so I think I'm going to just keep them like they are. So I'm going to dice those and add them to my cup. And you can see I'm going to have just what I need to finish this recipe as far as the 2.5 cups for the apples. So that's about my 1/2 cup, and it's a little bit over, but it's not going to be that important that you get it measured off. So I'm going to add these apples to those. And these apples already have that lemon juice mixed in with it, so you can see that they're not turning. So what I'm going to do is just to make sure that the other lemon juice that I have put on these other apples, that it's going to keep these apples nice, no brown spots, no darkening as it hits the air, because I want to make sure this recipe looks really good. So all I'm doing is just incorporating a little bit of that lemon juice into the new apples that I've added to this recipe. So you have a little bit of lemon juice, about 1 teaspoon, and that's to keep your apples from turning. So this is 2.5 cups of apples. So we have our apples, and I'm just going to move my cutting board to the side because I'm going to try to move the apples to my center. So I'll have it to where I can put the other ingredients. Now, for this recipe, it's really simple, and you can adjust, your recipes to your wants and your needs as far as what you like. This recipe calls for diced up celery, which is about 1 cup. That's about 4 stalks of celery to make 1 cup of this celery. So I've diced that up, and I'm going to add this to the recipe. And then I'm going to use this for later. And then once we have that, I'm going to go ahead and dump the pecans in there. And the pecans, that is about 1/2 cup of broken up pecans. Now these are pretty fine. If you like them bigger, that's up to you. You also can do that. Now, what I need to do now is, and it asks for a dash of salt, so I'm going to go ahead and put just a dash of salt on top of this yogurt. This is 1/2 cup of low-fat yogurt. And so I'm using yogurt because this is going to make the recipe just a little bit less fattening. So if you're trying to lose weight, trying to cut your calories, that's a great way to cut your calories. Now I do have a little bit of mayonnaise. I know a lot of salads like this, you've probably had a lot more mayonnaise, but we're only going to use a little bit of mayonnaise. And this is 2 tablespoons of mayonnaise. And so what I'm going to do is go ahead and add the mayonnaise to the yogurt. And also for this recipe, let's see if I can stack some of these real quick. You're also going to add sugar, just a little bit to make sure you've got the apples are sweet and everything's kind of incorporates sweet. So this is only but 1 tablespoon of sugar. So I'm going to go ahead and put the sugar in. So I'm just going to kind of mix this because I want all this mixed together before I put it on top of the salad. So this is just a little bit of sugar. This is a little bit of mayonnaise, a little bit of dash of salt, and a little bit of yogurt. So that's going to be our ingredients that we're going to mix this salad to make it stay together. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on top. And it smells really good already. I want to make sure I get all that off of there. And now what I'm going to do is just stir this around and make sure I get all this other mixtures all together. And you can see how pretty the salad is turning out. That celery just adds a little bit of green to it. And it smells really good. And also, once you get it mixed up, this really does help the apples from turning too. So the recipe is going to tell you that you need to store it in the refrigerator, chill just for a little bit. And so I did chill the apples a little bit, so they're chilled. And you don't have to. You can have it room temperature, but the recipe is going to tell you to chill the salad just for a little bit. So I've got everything just about with a little bit of the mixture on it. And as you can see, this is a very easy salad. And like I always say, you can adapt, change. Some people may want to add grapes to it. So, you know, you can take these recipes that you're seeing and then you could put it together and add more to it as far as your fruits. So you can change it, but this is just a simple recipe, getting ready to go somewhere really fast, need something to take it. But also, this works really well. You can stuff a tomato with it. You can do neat things with this salad right here. You could even make a sandwich out of, if you really wanted to do that, into a pita bread or something like that. It would be really refreshing. But just remember, buy the apples and things like that when it's in season because they're going to taste the best and the recipe is going to be at their best. So that's the reason why we're talking about apples, because they are in their peak of time. So I hope you're going to like this diced apple recipe. It's a great salad. I hope when Frank comes back, he's going to enjoy it just as much as I do. So we'll see you back in just a little bit. Welcome back to Garden Delights. We have Frank with us, and we're going to end up trying that recipe. But before we do that, one thing I did want to make sure that everybody knew is when I talk about a lot of this information about how to can or freeze an item, we do have a wonderful resource at our office that you can purchase. But it talks about how you can take those apples and you can freeze those apples. It tells you exactly how to do it. It also tells you if you want to make that apple jelly. You have a good recipe in here also to do that. And then if you're making applesauce, you want to make some applesauce, the apples are coming in. Please think about this book. It is wonderful. It breaks it down to the canning, the freezing, the drying, and each chapter, when you get done, if you've got a question or something didn't turn out right, it tells you little things that maybe you should have tried to make it right. So just if you're looking for trying to learn how to can or freeze or do something, apples is a great way to start this season. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that we had a wonderful resource that you also can use to do that. Frank, we have diced apple salad.
Diced apple, just what I wanted.
Well, good. And also I've added a little bit of a bed of romaine lettuce for us, and you can eat the lettuce if you really want to. So we're going to try a little bit of the salad, and you see what you think about it. It is a low-fat salad, so I'm just going to put a little bit on yours. Of course, you can have more after we get done, but I just want to make sure you can try it.
I'll need a picture of this to take to my doctor's office with me.
There you
go.
Low-fat
diet.
And you can tell him that you're eating your fruits and you're eating low-fat, so that's even better, right? So what do you think about it?
It's good.
The apples.
It tastes like apple.
Tastes like apples? Well, it should, hopefully. So, so really easy recipe. I put pecans in it, so you could put walnuts in it if you like walnuts. So you can try different things with it. The apples taste pretty good.
It's very good.
What do you think about the yogurt in it? Can you tell it's got yogurt in it?
I can tell.
That's what I figured you were going to say.
I'm a connoisseur of tasting things. I knew every ingredient. As soon as I put it in my mouth, I knew exactly what was in it.
I knew you knew that. I did. Well, this is a great recipe. It's so easy to make. It'll hopefully please your family too, as much as it pleases us and our family to make. Easy to put together, take someone really quick. I hope you'll enjoy it. Check out our website. It will show you the recipe and how to put this recipe together we talked about today. And Frank and I will see you next time on Garden Delights.
Okay.